What is up, Partner Up? We're back for a first of its kind episode. I'm very excited about this one today because if you look, for those dozens of you that watch on YouTube, I know we actually do have a few thousand people that listen to the podcast, but for the dozens of you on YouTube, you would be sitting and seeing two people in the same camera, and they happen to be married. This is our first partnerships couple. Welcome, Jen Linehan and Kevin Linehan, to Partner Up.
Thank you, Jared. Happy to be here.
Thrilled. Jared.
Thrilled to be. Kevin looks a little bit less happy, I have to say. There was some hesitancy in that one there. You're like, I don't know what I signed up for and I agreed to here.
I'm excited about this couples edition. This is like a trial run for this new format, Jared. We have a list of other potential couples that we could, bring on. So all the pressure is on Jennifer and Kevin to prove that this is a workable format.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, there's some shoes to fill because like next up we're gonna have the McBains, right? So we got Jay and Michelle, so it's not like there's gonna be some awesome other people to follow. But Jen and Kevin, I have to call out something real quick. There's this like wooden map of the U.S. and like I feel like I've looked at this wooden map of the U.S. like for years and years and like probably hundreds of Zoom calls, Kevin. And then Jen, I've seen you there whenever I've like talked to High Alpha for a little bit. Yeah, there it is, moving around. It's really crazy to see you both in the same shot. And maybe we can kind of start there. Like, why do we all happen to know each other? I think it all starts with a coat of orange paint, right? That's how you two met, was at HubSpot. Is that right?
That's exactly right. First day of work. I was new to Boston, walked in on the first day, and we were part of the same training class. And, I was very focused on work, but Kevin also caught my eye. So, things transpired from there.
Yeah.
And I don't think he noticed me, by the way.
Very focused on work.
Very focused on work. I can tell somebody's going to get in trouble on this episode already. Somebody's in trouble on this episode.
One question in, and yeah.
No, so... did you both start in partnerships at the same time in the same class, or was it in different roles where you ended up working in partnerships?
No, we were both, we were two of the first three hires made by Mr. Caputa onto the partner team, from the outside. To that point, the VAR team, as it was called, was built entirely from internal movement, migration of people that wanted to join Pete's mission. So yeah, we jumped right in as the first three external hires, along with Mark Stoddard, who was at HubSpot for years and years and is now at ClickUp. Amazing.
So for those of you who don't know, that name is Pete Caputa. Pete's been a mentor to me at PandaDoc and then was at Drift as well. And that's where it's actually how we ended up working together, is because of the gentleman, Pete. So Kevin and I worked together at Drift through what Kevin I think beautifully described as the meat grinder, like that experience. It was a hard fought run at Drift. But I asked Pete Caputa, I was like, Pete, I need like the best person that I could possibly bring onto the team. And without skipping a beat, he said, it's Kevin Linehan. So that's where I was like, I was like, give me his cell number, started texting you. And then we met up at, I always forget the name of that place in Boston, but then hard sell ever since.
Yeah, it was Tate, by the way.
Tate, there we go.
Just went to Tate this morning.
It's one of my favorite places. Yep.
She's in trouble now and she found one. But yes, Tate, the Drift coffee shop, basically.
What was HubSpot for both of you? Because both of you now are very much on board with like you're immersed in partnerships in terms of believing in as a strategy, all the stuff that we talk about, having taken the partner pill, seeing the era of ecosystems or the decade of ecosystems and kind of aligning your careers around that. Did you kind of get religion on that at HubSpot? Was it through that experience that you sort of saw this approach to go to market as the future? I'm really curious from both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I remember, so I was actually, prior to joining HubSpot, I was at a company called Compendium, which it was blogging software. And at the time we were competing against HubSpot back when, one of HubSpot's core features was just the blog tool. And so I remember meeting Brian Halligan at a trade show, and him just coming up to the booth and saying, how is Compendium different than HubSpot? It then led to him saying, hey, why don't you come work at HubSpot? And I picked up and moved in Indianapolis, Indiana. I moved to Boston. And I just remember Halligan setting me up with I remember talking to Mike Volpe randomly. I remember talking to Roberge. I remember talking to Pete. And just him not really knowing like what I would do there. And so just making all of these introductions. And I just remember what Pete said really resonated around like this thing that they were doing, and it's sort of being like a nights and weekends project. But they've seen a lot of traction internally, and just selling me on like building this like motion at HubSpot. And so that was what I was really drawn to. And then of course, the early days were, figuring it out, but I think Pete had already figured a lot out. And as long as you sort of bought into Pete's, I think, way of doing things, like he posted something on LinkedIn the other day where he posted a picture of this marketing agency grader that we used to use. And I remember my initial reaction to it was I absolutely hated it. It just felt like, why would we, you're getting on the phone with a brand new marketing agency who's already interested in HubSpot. Like, why don't you just answer their questions and kind of give them what they want? Where it really kind of helped you turn the tables to understand, is this a good agency to partner with, both for them and for us? And qualification you typically think of as being something that is valuable to a seller and less valuable to the buyer. But it was just this tool that it was both. It provided that value to both parties. And so it was just one of those things that Pete came up with. He said, you guys should use this. And, so much of the channel and the partnership program has Pete's name written all over it. And obviously seeing the success and the trajectory of that program certainly made me a fan and just have a new understanding of that motion.
I love that you said this was like a nights and weekends thing. It's such a, you've heard before, and a lot of venture capitalists will talk about this. Like, hey, I want to know what people are working on in their nights and weekends, because that's where the future lives, right? And like for your own career, for those listening, what are those things that you don't have time to fit in your day to day, but you love working on them, and there's kind of your nights and weekend projects. Those are often really good sources of where you might get the most return down the road. So that's just cool. That's exciting to me to just like almost relive that with you as you're describing to me that he's like, hey, we got this other thing. And that kind of became the thing.
There's a good article. Gosh, I can't remember if it's Fast Company or Inc., but it's an article by Halligan titled "Why I Fire My Best Employees," and it's a story about Pete and how Pete was fired, right, from his account executive position to start the partner program. It was good, but it talks about the journey. I think when I realized how special what we were building really was a couple years into it, when the playbook worked and we were seeing such virality within the community, and combined with the sort of wave of inbound marketing and just how much success we were driving for the business through these partners, it made you realize like this is really something special. Mm-hmm. Pete used to joke with Halligan that if the partner program contributed 50% of the company's revenue in a quarter, that Pete could have his job. Pete could take Halligan's job. And we got pretty damn close. We probably got to like 46, 47% on a pretty consistent basis. We never quite crossed that 50% mark, but just knowing how much your role was contributing to the rocket ship that was HubSpot back in 2013, 2014, like it made you realize that you were really onto something, and you were really contributing to the success of this.
To what extent do you think what happened at HubSpot?
Can I just chime in there real quick?
Yeah.
I just want to comment on something that Kevin said, because I also remember that Halligan had the aha moment around partnerships. I remember when he stood up there and he was doing some sort of presentation, and it was the first time that we saw him say, okay, if he talked a lot about like CAC and like if you put $1 into the machine and you get $3 out or $4 out. And I remember him comparing the direct channel and saying, please don't like hold me to these numbers, but it was like you put $1 in on direct and you get $3 out. And then he contrasted that to the VAR program at the time. And he said, if you put $1 in the machine, we get $7 out. And it just felt like from that moment forward, you know, there was like top-down buy-in when Halligan and probably the leadership team could see that very clearly. It felt like there was top-down buy-in, which I think doesn't always happen. Like if you don't turn that corner at an organization where, you know, everybody from the top sees the value of that channel, sometimes it can be an uphill battle.
Isaac, you were hopping in.
All right. So my question is, to what extent do you look at what happened at HubSpot as a unique right place at the right time? You can't replicate that because that play's already been played. That was a moment in time where things were at a certain point of evolution, where MarTech was new, and to what extent can you say, no, there's some enduring principles here that can apply repeatedly over and over again?
Well, it's obviously both, right? Like I think that the wave of inbound is likely to not be replicated. I mean, you could say it might be, right? But like probably not. And just the combination of factors that all converged at the same time, I would say it's pretty hard to replicate. I would also say that my biggest learning was actually after I left HubSpot and joined Jared, and I realized how hard the HubSpot partner model would be to replicate in Drift's business, or now since leaving Drift and being a part of other companies, same thing, right? Like I don't think that model works in today's sales organization or SaaS organization, but there are those key principles that I truly believe made the program and the people within it so successful. And that's the partners, that is us as ICs or sales leaders, right? There are a number of those principles that should be replicated. We should all strive to replicate those things, because I think they were a little bit ahead of their time in terms of the partnership game.
Namely, help your partner build a better business. What's the first one that comes to mind?
Oh, geez. Yes. Make your partners famous.
Yeah.
That's harder to do is how do you solve your partner's problems? And, to your point, Jared, build a better business as much as you're solving their clients' problems, right? And I think that a lot of programs sort of start by, hey, this is the value that this solution brings to your clients. This is why you should use it, because it drives better outcomes for them. But we were maniacal, to your point, about helping these agencies build stronger, better businesses. And that was what really I think a lot of our partners looked to us as true trusted advisors, folks they could really count on to help their livelihood. And again, this is HubSpot, and let's rewind the clock to 2011, 2012. These are very small businesses, right? Our customer base was super SMB, and the agencies that served them were tiny. I met Bob Ruffalo of Impact Branding and Design, who's now one of HubSpot's biggest partners, when he was a 6-person shop working out of his parents' basement, and then out of his house. Like it was.
I want to ask you I want to interrupt you real quick, Kevin, and ask you a couple questions to both of you, or just about Bob specifically. Can you call Bob today, and would he pick up your call, Kevin?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Did either of you have direct sales experience prior to joining HubSpot?
Yes.
We both did.
Yeah, we both did.
Can you name someone that you sold to where you could call them and they'd pick up your call?
I cannot.
No, I can't either.
I think I like to harken back some of these conversations that we talk about to first principles, and like I like to say this same 10 things 1,000 times versus 1,000 things, one time. That's the power of compound interest in action. That's really, really important, I think, for new world go-to-market people to understand. If you're coming from sales, you're coming from marketing, you're coming from any other position where it's a transactional relationship versus a relationship where you're truly there for the long term. Look what that does for, your network, your career. I imagine that both of you to some degree took those relationships that you built during your time building an amazing partner program that are still with you today. How different is that than other business relationships, one-on-one, et cetera? I mean, that's, to me, is what I find so fascinating, is that this partnerships moment, if you actually help people, like to your point, Kevin, you're maniacal about helping them build a better business, fixing their problem. That's a relationship that you have in your network you can carry forward. Whereas all these AEs out there, like, walking down President's Club aisle, the Gong Show, the Zoom, oh my gosh, number one on the quota board. Guess what? In 3 years, it doesn't mean shit. It means nothing. Whereas if you really help, 10, 20, 30 partners, these are relationships that carry forward with you for quite some time. I mean, Kevin, we went through battle together, and we still talk. We still talk, right?
But it's an attitude, and it's a mindset. Individual contributors, folks that are in leadership, like in partnerships, have to bring that mindset to work every day for that day. It doesn't just happen because you're in partnerships. Like, you've got to be really intentional about it. You and I, Jared, saw, definitely a few folks at Drift where they really struggled to get out of the transactional sales mindset and really be focused on building the relationship. So I think it's definitely something to be intentional about. And I think that's what makes a great partner professional, is someone that
play long-term games with long-term people.
Yeah. It's the difference between partnering with someone and having someone who is in your partner program or who is technically a partner, right? Like, if you've actually partnered with them, you've done something together. That's that shared struggle, that shared success. That's that person you can go back and call, even in a small way. If you've done co-authored a blog post together, or a webinar together, or if you've worked on a software integration together, you've co-developed it, you've been through something together and achieved something together. That's where you're going to be able to tap into that living in market information, because that person will also give you real candid information about what they value. Whereas someone you sold to, if you close the deal or not, and you ask them for feedback, they may give you some, but it's not going to be that valuable. But someone you did something together, you're going to be like, hey man, tell me honestly, what matters most to you? In fact, I just did this. I just messaged Scott from Fernio and was like, tell me about that event that we did together. Like, what worked and what didn't? What did you like? And we went through just the scheduling and planning together, right? It's just a little mini challenge. It's a little mini battle. But now we're like, we're bonded. We're a band of brothers. We went through something together. He's going to give me real feedback. And that's the kind of stuff that it's such a big difference to just like checking a list or completing a transaction.
Jen, I think that's a really good segue to, post HubSpot. Kevin, I've probably I've made lots of people throw up for how many times I've probably talked about Drift on this podcast. I'd love to hear, Jen, a little bit about your transition to the VC world, because what's so interesting is I had a little bit of exposure for about 6 months to the VC world in terms of them being a customer, which you're aware of. I don't think our listeners are, so we won't talk about that. But the period that shall not be named. What I noticed that was so interesting is that, VC world, you don't have go-to-market teams in VC world, right? You don't have sales and marketing and a funnel. What do you have? It's departments that are called things like platform. Now, platform at a VC doesn't mean the same thing as platform at a tech company, of course, but you have partnerships, platform, which means that a community, everything that you do in venture capital is based on what? Relationships, right? Partnerships, things that last over time. How did the HubSpot experience and being partner pilled, if you will, working with Pete Caputa and seeing these businesses be transformed, these longer term relationships, right? Like, how loyal are these people to HubSpot 10, 11, 12, 13 years later? It's wild to see. They still fly the orange flag everywhere. And then why did that make you pivot into VC?
it didn't make me pivot into VC, but I have, the relationships I built at HubSpot in the channel were not necessarily transferable. I did build relationships. Like I remember one of our very first Japanese partner, one of the women like gifted me like a baby bag, and we still are in touch on like Facebook, and so those relationships personally have like gone on and developed, but unlike Kevin, I haven't really been able to take those relationships and then leverage them in a new like way in business.
Was it a signal to the High Alpha team? So like I also didn't call that out. So Jen, you lead partnerships at High Alpha, like part incubator, part accelerator, part VC fund, which is really cool. Everyone go check out High Alpha if you haven't yet. And see Jen speak at PLX Summit on the, so there's our mid-roll plug. Was that a signal that you could build these longer term relationships, you think, to the Eric or Scott or the High Alpha team?
Well, initially I was hired not to do partnerships per se, but what we realized, so High Alpha, as you mentioned, Jared, is one part studio. So we actually do have like go-to-market marketing and those functions on the studio side because we're starting businesses and we are like co-founding businesses with them. On what is more traditional.
But not for recruitment though, just to interrupt you. That's not for recruiting new people or new ideas. That's for helping portcos or portfolio companies proper that are incubated and started by the studio company, right?
That's right. Yeah. And then on the fund side, you're right. We don't, go-to-market doesn't exist. And so when I started at High Alpha, I actually reached out to Scott Dorsey, who's our managing partner. And I just remember thinking like, how do I sort of leverage what I've learned, but in a new way, and just kind of being open to all possibilities. And so I reached out to Scott Dorsey, who was an old connection. And I said, here's what my experience is. I, mentioned sales and partnerships, and he, there was no like open rec or anything for what I was reaching out for. But I think that he saw, okay, on the studio side of the businesses, we help these new companies with everything from, back office to marketing to go-to-market, but we kind of stop at like helping them sell. And so he hired me and just kind of said, like, work with these CEOs and help them with early traction. And so V1 of my role at High Alpha was that. And then quickly I got into these companies and realized that, we don't even have a product at the stage that I'm trying to help them. We definitely don't have any leads. And so I ended up sort of being a well-paid SDR. And I remember going to my boss and saying, I don't think this is what you want me to be doing. So let's sort of rethink this.
Yeah, but I think there's one thing though, I think that you missed there, which is you were actually drawing on years of experience at HubSpot, helping to teach these agencies how to sell better and how to sell differently. And that translated really well, I think, to those early days of High Alpha, trying to help these founders sell something that they had never sold before, right? They're like your approach to,
okay.
And that it coincided really well with the timing was right around the time where HubSpot was helping a number of these agencies go in and sell sales services where they've never sold, all they've ever sold was marketing services before, right? And so I remember distinct conversations where we were going back and forth and saying, like, this is what you can leverage from like this type of training material and apply to what you were trying to help like Anvil and some of those other companies with.
Yes, that's true. I remember like helping them create playbooks and it still though felt like not as effective as it could be or what we wanted it to be. And so that's when it took this pivot to building like more of like a partnerships role where I was thinking of like an advisory network and building a network of people we could lean on to offer feedback and be early beta customers. And so it sort of took this different spin that I would say is under the partnerships umbrella. Which, yeah, I mean, I suppose there are transferable things that maybe I don't think about as much, but yeah, it was a completely different role.
From a macro perspective, do you how do you think your knowledge and immersion into partnerships and seeing how this plays out, and what a difference it makes in go to market to have those, indirect routes, does that change the way that you look for and assess investment opportunities?
Yes. And if I understand your question correctly, Isaac, when we are evaluating a deal, for example, like, is there a strategic partnership on day one or some sort of like unfair advantage that this company has? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say it's like one of the most important things that we think about. And that's transferred to the studio side of the business as well, where, you have all of your standard things like, do we have the right founder for, a really great idea? Is there a very clear wedge and a place that we can start? But and more so recently, I would say of the last 5 companies that we've started on the studio side, I would say 3 of those have started with some sort of partnership, either established or it's clear that like this will transpire into something, which is very different even than 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where that was sort of a nice to have. And now we very much view that as that unfair advantage day one, be able to come out of the gate swinging as like, that will heavily influence our decision on whether we're going to start a company or not.
So today, Jen, you have obviously it's kind of funny. There's a lot of partner language built into venture capital, and actually, ironically, I think you're the first VC proper that we've had on PartnerUp. Now we're going to have a lot more. I think Christina Cordova was still at Notion. Now she's at First Round. So technically she doesn't count because she wasn't a VC then. But there's partner language and lexicon built into the very world of venture capital. You have things like what? General partners or limited partners. And then you have all these other things around here. Like they are committed to your business to some degree. But tell me about like the partners proper that you have today. Like it's really everyone. It's like your LPs are a partner type. And then you have some tech companies that you work more closely with. You have like, how is that the same or not the same, today, sitting from today's vantage point?
Yeah, it is fuzzy, isn't it? And it even like, it can vary pretty widely from one venture capital company to another. I know that at some VCs, like an operating partner is like somebody who oversees, like high level, oversees the operations of the portfolio, where in our world, it is a former founder that's now helping our CEOs like as like a thought partner outside of their board, for example. So there is a lot of like partner language that I think gets a little confusing in VC because it can vary very widely.
But do you view those all as partners, right? Like part of the network that is High Alpha, the ecosystem that's, sort of being created, like everyone's a partner? Or are there specific kinds where you're like, well, no, not really. Like, and I don't really think about LPs, or do you think about LPs? I mean, I have to imagine that you, like, if an LP can help a portco with something, like you're probably doing something with them, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't, but I imagine our partners do.
Right.
A lot of our limited partners are on our board as well, and therefore, like, you can leverage them in a way that like I wouldn't, because I don't sit in those meetings. But the way that I view partnerships, at least in my role, up to 4 years now, like you can, I actually spent quite a bit of time building our perks program for a while, and like reaching out to technology companies and, trying to partner with them on like giving our portfolio, especially the really early stage companies, steep discounts sort of upfront to use their technology. That's been a little commoditized, I would say, even over the last few years, where I tried to get much smarter about, okay, like, for example, these new studio companies, the transition from founder selling to sales team selling, or even the first 2 salespeople selling, they would benefit from a Gong-like technology or Chorus-like technology where they can sort of develop this knowledge base and record all their calls, and then they can hand it to their first salesperson, right? Where that's a technology that usually is quite a bit later stage, at least the way that they position their use case. And so it's worthwhile for me to reach out to Gong and not just say, hey, can you offer a discount? But also like, let's train our CEOs together on how they might use this. And so through the perks lens in VC, I think that sort of partnership works very well. When you're just thinking of it through like the discount mindset, I think that's not super value added.
You know, it's interesting, Jared. I'm glad you sort of teased out the parallels here, because so when I was raising for my last company, when you talk to VC firms, what they will pitch you is, hey, we're value add. What does that mean? That means that we can do more than just give you money, right? And as a founder, that doesn't mean much to you if it's like, oh, we're going to call you and give you advice. Because most of the time, with a very few exceptions, you're like, yeah, right. Oh, we're all operators ourselves. We're going to call you and give you advice. And you're kind of like, maybe. But what does matter is their ecosystem. Who's in that venture capitalist? Who's in their ecosystem? Who are their limited partners? Who are their other portfolio companies? Who are they one phone call away from that's relevant to your business? And they'll try to offer different things. Hey, we have a Slack group where founders can talk with each other. Sometimes that's beneficial. Hey, we have perks. We can get discounts. Sometimes that's beneficial. But the process as a founder of assessing the value of partnering with them by taking their money is very similar to, I think, if you're running a partner program and you're trying to get people to come into it, they're gonna look at all those same things. Who's in your ecosystem? Who do you have influence with? Yeah, maybe a community in a Slack group is good. Maybe an FAQ page is good. Maybe a list of discounts is good. Those are nice. But what I really want to know is who's in your ecosystem that I am going to get to benefit from, because now I'm in their ecosystem.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why you've seen the rise of like platform type roles or community type roles in VC. It's exactly what you said, Isaac, where money's not enough anymore. So what else can you offer me and, that's valuable outside of money? And I think that something that we've seen that is very valuable is ecosystem and, relationships that you have and doorways you can open, which is obviously very tied to partnerships.
So we all know that if you're in partnerships, to do it well, you're doing things like giving, you're creating value, you're going out of your way to be helpful. You're putting the partner first and their needs first. You're trying to make sure that it's a win-win.
Oh no.
Do you treat your partner at home as well as you treat your partners in business?
Oh. Am I supposed to answer for like, are we supposed to...
Let's get both.
Oh boy. I'd love to say yes, but the answer is probably no, right? More recently...
No, you're thoughtful. I mean, I probably don't do that as well as you do, actually.
Okay, yeah.
That just 180 from where we thought that was going to go, by the way. And I think we just made the Linehan household slightly happier. So there we go. Yeah. It's interesting. The parallels that like exist around us everywhere. Like, we just went through this great analogy. I love that segment, Jen, where Isaac and, you and we were kind of like all figuring out like, look, this is a partnership whenever you're giving someone money. And like, there has to be more value outside of that transaction, right? So like in a personal relationship where I had this quote the other day from Tony Robbins of all people. So, it's like, it's Tony Robbins. So he's rah on everything. But he said, and I think you could replace relationships with partnership. Partnerships are somewhere you go to give, not somewhere you go to take. And like, that really struck me at home and like how I think about like my relationship with my wife. And not that I'm asking or trying to put either of you in this spot. I genuinely not. It's just the moments where it's like things are great in the household. I'm in like giver mode. And the moments where things are like really hard, I'm in take mode. Right? Like I have lots of demands of my own family or my relationship or whatever. And I'm like, God, that exists. That's literally the same thing with my partners. Right? So when I'm in give mode, everyone loves me. Right? And it's like, hey, I gotta call in that favor now. Like I gotta do that thing. I need you for this. I actually don't feel as happy. And then my partner doesn't feel, it feels really weird to like, there's something here. And I'm certain as a couple, without risking anything existential here, you probably have experienced that same dynamic to some degree as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Isn't
right?
isn't there a book written about this too, by the way? I think it's like called The Love Tank that you're referring to, where
No, you made me read that book. It's called His Needs, Her Needs.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
See, Kevin's like, I remember that book. I remembered it very well.
I thought he was going to say, you made me read that book. It was the Partner Hacker Handbook, and it changed our relationship forever.
No, there's a book called Partnering that just came out too from Simon Sinek's publishing group. The author's blanking right now. That's not bad. It's about partnerships writ large, like from personal relationships and like why the next evolution of a relationship is a partnership and what that means. So friends, family, spouses, business, like true co-founders, right? Like what do real partnerships mean? It's a phenomenal book. But go ahead. You're making a point, Jen.
No, well, were you asking like our relationship, or were you asking through?
I'm just saying I've observed that whenever I have, like, is it true that partnerships are a place where you go to give, not a place where you go to take? Because if it is true, I've noticed when I'm in a giving mode, like I'm giving to my family, my partner, my whatever, business or in life, I actually feel better. But then there's sometimes where I do have to take.
Yes.
Right. Like I got to ask for that thing in return. And I actually don't like that. Like it's not good for me and it's not good for the other party. So it's like, well, no wonder that relationships where it's all about take, they never last. Partnerships that never last. Have you experienced that? Like, is that phenomenon something where I've just, put in my own head, or do you feel like that's in your own partnership in those walls or outside?
I mean, yes, that is very true. It's interesting though. I heard something the other day. Something you said just made me think of this, but I heard something the other day where if you ask somebody like for an introduction, or you ask somebody for something, especially like in the professional sense, and say, hey, will you, do X, Y, Z? They actually feel more indebted to you. Like that's a way of like building the relationship, even if you're asking for something. So I don't know if that's a take. Or a form of a take, but I just thought it was a really interesting thing to ponder, because I think that it just goes into, even if you're asking for something, it's still like a form of relationship building.
I would agree. I think there's some like ordinal scale where you at any given point you can't data driven say like, hey, that was a transaction out of this bucket, take, or a transaction in this bucket, give. Like if you ever try to measure it, it's like quantum theory. Mm-hmm. It's like spooky action at a distance. You try to measure it, and by trying to measure it, by the virtue of you just very much trying to measure it, it doesn't exist, right? So it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, you have to do those takes, or I shouldn't even call them a takes.
I don't know if it's a take, but it kind of feels.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a take. It's it's this sliding scale, so to speak, where it's not like hard line. It's that you're acting in a way where there is some expected or anticipated reciprocity, right? So if you're like, let's say, demanding that someone make an introduction, or they must do this thing, that probably doesn't go over so well in business or at home. Right. Whereas if it's part of the relationship, right, so done right, it doesn't necessarily slide the scale too far that other direction towards what would be a take.
I'm going to push on this a little bit, because I actually was just putting together today a presentation that I'm giving tomorrow for a career workshop on how to build social capital. I'm going to push on this a little bit and try to stick with the give ask language, because sometimes what sounds like an ask is actually another type of a give. So if I go to somebody and say, hey, will you watch this video and give me your feedback on it? That's an ask that's kind of a burden to them. Somebody I've never met. I get a cold email from someone saying something like that to me. Go look at my website and give me feedback, Isaac. I'm like, If that same person emails me cold and says, hey, I've noticed you on a lot of different podcasts. How do you decide which podcast to go on? I'm actually happy to answer that. I'm flattered. Why? Because they have given me an opportunity to do what every human loves, to talk about themselves. They have flattered me by saying, you are good at something. You have something I wish I had, right?
Kevin smiled really big in that one. I think Kevin does that sometimes, just FYI. I saw that big smile.
Like that's a different, and like, especially if somebody's younger than you or whatever, and they come to you for advice in a way that's not super demanding of you, except for, hey, tell me why you do this. Why are you good at this? What do you think about this? Do you have any advice for someone who's looking for their first job, whatever? That's actually a give. They're giving me an opportunity to do what every person wants to do. Talk about themselves and give advice to younger people, right? So like, I think sometimes it's like a language game maybe, but putting yourself in that spot and thinking, what would I like
Yeah.
to be asked or approached for? That's not a hard one for me. That doesn't create a big burden for me. It actually feels good, you know?
Yeah, no, and I run our advisory program, and that's absolutely, I am constantly asking people in our network for advice on, hey, is this a good idea? Poke holes in it. Is it a bad idea? And what I've learned in building our advisory network, one of the things I've learned is this idea that like a lot of these people who we've invited into this network are climbing their second mountain. And what I mean by that is, I think there's actually a book called Second Mountain, where the first mountain is climb, climb, climb. And it's all about like, can I get a big title? And can I, sort of all these external impressive things, where your second mountain is all about like giving back. And so when somebody offers you, even through an ask, a way of like giving back, that can actually be a give, to your point. So we're getting a little philosophical, aren't we? Maybe
That's what we do.
That's the PartnerUp ways. First principles, metaphors, mental models. Kevin, I saw many facial expressions during that exchange, which means there's many thoughts. I would like to turn the mic over to you, sir.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I have any real thoughts. I was laughing originally at Isaac because like I hate to talk about myself in general, right? So so not every person loves to talk about themselves. Yeah, no, I don't know. I think my wife summed it up well.
There are, the personal like bucket thing is real. Of like, I probably tend to think often about, are you taking from my love tank or are you giving? And I think that the health of a relationship can very much be tied to that.
If we're swinging back to that specifically, I think that, two working adults with, pretty demanding roles, 2 kids, 2 dogs, right? Like we each have our own stuff going on, right? And so the more that I can recognize what she has going on and lighten that load or lessen that burden or make it easier for her to do what she needs to do, like obviously things are going to be better in the household. So going back to partnerships, right? Like if you really understand what your partner is up against, what they're facing at the end of a month or end of a quarter, like your ability to help them through that, as opposed to asking for that deal signed or help getting a deal over the finish line when they've got this mountain of other stuff. Like that's absolutely true, in relationships and partnerships in life, right? Like how do you think about, how do you lessen your partner's burden? But you have to understand who they are and what they're going through.
What's so interesting about what you said, Kevin, is it's one thing to hear some people speak that language and then like you never know what their home life's like. We both experience the world like colliding, like professional and personal at the same time, like working Adrift at the same time and like dealing with like, okay, daycare's canceled again. Like Jen and I got to figure this out. And I actually want to point something out. Like I wasn't a father whenever, you came and worked you came to Drift. And then it was like 3 months later. What's that?
No, it was about 3 days that you weren't a father. And then 3 days into my new role, you left me for a month.
Yeah, this was Kevin's onboarding. I'm on paternity leave. See ya.
Hey, wait a minute. That is a pattern here. Just a second. That sounds familiar.
No, we've worked together for longer than that, Isaac. But yes, that's true. Hey, and I also like this time was way crazy. Those two are not the same, but yes, kudos for pointing that out, Isaac. What I actually wanted to say was, like, I got to see you go through that transition, and it actually taught me, Kevin, a lot about like how, because you would bring that part of you to work, meaning like you weren't scared to talk about like, hey, I got to help with this or this, or hey, I want to proactively do this or this. And I think a lot of people that transition into that kind of like next phase of their partnership where they're having children and they have a child. And actually I've read a lot from Isaac about this too. Like I've consumed a lot of his content on parenting, but then just seeing you go through that and how you partner at your home actually was really inspirational to me on how I need to be empathetic and understand like, oh, I have to proactively plan around these things. I need to be thinking like a partner. I've seen you do it firsthand. And I just want to commend you on that because for you to say it, it's actually genuine.
Okay.
Kevin doesn't want to take a compliment. He'll just sit there in silence, like, okay, sure.
But you're right.
No, I appreciate it. It's hard work, but it's
a labor of love.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's thoughtful, and that is, you can see it in the way that he does business and partners and also at home. That was in my wedding vows, I think. Something about you being thoughtful.
There you go. I mean, and then
look at that. Look at that. What a wonderful, sweet way to end the conversation there, huh?
It's beautiful way to the first couples edition of the PartnerUp podcast. Kevin, I have one final question for you. This is more just fun and off the cuff. What the hell did you think whenever I started this podcast at Drift? I want your honest thing, because I guarantee it had to have been like, what the fuck are you doing?
No, not at all. Because no, I didn't think that. I mean, Drift at the time already had some really successful podcasts, right? Like DC, DG, Sean Lane, right? They were already Bilotti, right? They were all running their podcasts. I was probably more surprised that you did it on your own as opposed to under the umbrella of the Drift podcasts. I was probably surprised at the time that you were adding one more thing to your plate. It was probably the most like, well, what the hell, dude?
What is he doing?
And then you wanted me to host with you, and I was like, oh God, that's just is that no. But you had a great host in Bartels, and so
I had the co-host curse, so like it wouldn't have worked out anyways, because I think I've gone through like 3 co-hosts, and now Isaac's number 4. So we'll see how long that lasts. But it's so cool to have you both on here. It's been great getting to know you both over the years, and I think you are role models in your field of work, and I think you're role models at home. And I think in this world where the lines are blurring between personal and professional, increasingly, the people who are their real selves, like you're just not getting the shady person with shady business dealings and then like a bad family life. Like those things come back and haunt you. Like, that's why I was happy to like platform this conversation. Like we got to have the Linehans on. They're like 2 of the most awesome people I know. They set a fantastic example, taught me a lot about how to be a parent, taught me a lot about partnering. So yeah, we're going to end on a sappy, fun note.
Yeah, that is. Thank you for creating a space for us to talk about this.
Absolutely. Isaac, what do we got to end with? PLX. Oh, we should talk about what we're going to do. Like we should real quick for the people that actually made it 15 minutes into the podcast. The PLX house? Yeah,
this is perfect. The PLX house. This is the greatest idea since the last idea that me and Jared had. That's how good it is. So for PLX, we have the whole Partner Hacker team and the MC for the event. We rented a big house.
It's a 6,000 square foot house.
We're all going to be in there. We're going to have like
bedrooms.
multiple. Yeah, it's huge. It's like a party house. It's got a zip line. We're going to have multiple studios where we're on doing these sessions during PLX all in the same place. And I think what we want to do is like, this is my idea anyway. We're going to do it like real world style, where we're going to like film it. And then after PLX, we're going to release like an episode of a reality TV show where we have like the confession booth and everything. That's what I want to do with it.
We totally are, by the way. That's what's actually happening, but it's going to be cool. So if you go to PLX, you're actually going to have a continuity of experience where we have a main stage, we have a podcast room, and we have an MC booth where you're not just seeing, like 4 different people's Zoom cams. Y'all are going to love it. It's going to be a blast. So if you're not registered, go to plxsummit.com. You can see Jen speak there on day 1 on Startup Day. Just announced some other awesome people like Nathan Latka, probably one of the most controversial people in SaaS. He's opening up the day. We have Andrew Chen closing the day. It's going to be awesome. The PLX house, you'll get to see us all in the same spot for the first time ever, the entire Partner Hacker team producing it. And yeah, we will see you all next time. Linehan family, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Peace out, PartnerUp.
See you soon.